they're insular and they only care about themselves. So we see that here. And then this idea about they twist Scripture. This is an important idea we're going to see repeated again. What do you think it means?
They rely on Scripture and God as the sort of explanation for why they're doing these evil, dastardly things that they're doing, and with no justification, because Scripture apparently, according to Quran, doesn't instruct people to behave.
Okay, so right, so they misinterpret and and justify nefarious actions on the basis of Scripture. That would be one aspect of it. What else do you think this might mean? If they twist Scripture and attribute things to God, which are
does it have to do with it's the time of the rabbis when they're interpreting? Yeah, I think so. Right. So this is contemporaneous, certainly, with the Talmudic rabbis, who are active in interpreting and reinterpreting the Torah. And this is an accusation that we find also in Christianity among the church fathers, which is that the Jews receive God's revelation from Sinai, but then they go about reading it in a way that perverts the meaning of the text. The accusation that the Christians level against us in this respect is that the Talmud is a falsification of the Torah. The rabbis create a new religion, as it were, and say that it's the legitimate interpretation of the Torah, but really it's not. Okay? Incidentally, it's not only Christians who accuse the rabbis of that. We have it even within Jewish thought. Okay? There was a sect of Jews in the Middle Ages called the Karaites. If you ever heard that term, they were large in the Middle Ages, and they were opponents of the rabbis. And they held that the Talmud is the same thing, that the rabbis were just making things up, it has nothing to do with the Torah, and that Judaism is based on the Torah alone. Now, the Karaites eventually lost the battle of ideas and faded away. The rabbis prevailed. Even again, later on in our time, classical Reform Judaism essentially held the same thing, which was rejected the authority of the Talmud and said, forget all that. It's cock-a-baby stuff, and it's the Bible is all that really matters. Okay, so this is an accusation that's leveled against the sages of our tradition, both from within and from without. But whereas from within, it's a kind of a battle of ideas about the kind of the meaning of the text and how Jewish life should be lived. From without, it's leveled as an accusation of deliberate wickedness and nefariousness, meaning the rabbis of Judaism are perverting the meaning of God's revelation. And what the Jews have today in Muhammad's time, the way they live, is not what God taught. They've just twisted it and falsified the meaning of revelation. And so on that basis, Islamic thought makes a distinction between the ancient Israelites, who are described in the Torah, and the Jews, okay, who are the rabbinic Jews. They're not the same thing. The ancient Israelites are good. They're the descendants of Abraham and the ones who received God's revelation from Moses. The Jews are the evil, nefarious people who have perverted the meaning of revelation. Okay? That's an important distinction. And that name Jew will be utilized to signify all of that. A Jew is arrogant, cunning, and perverts the meaning of the truth deliberately. Okay? These are all important tropes in Islamic anti-Semitic thought. Rich, you had a question.
Well, I don't want to get off track, but isn't there a lot of truth to that? I mean, the one that I always remember is that in the Talmud they reinterpreted the death penalty. You can't institute the death penalties unless two people. They kind of decided the Torah was kind of silly, and they only have the death penalty if two people see the act occurring, which was a way of getting rid of the death penalty. So depending, how things look depending on where you're standing and every time. So depending on how you're looking at it, yeah, the Talmudic stuff did transform what was in the Torah and reinterpret it, and it depends whether you want to say they made it up or it was in Judaism. It's divine. They acted through some kind of divine inspiration.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
It's in the literal. It's not incorrect. That accusation is not incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, it's not incorrect to say that the the meaning of the scripture as it's represented in the Talmud is different from the literal meaning of the scripture in many respects. That's for sure. But you're right, it kind of depends on how you see it. I mean, the sages present themselves as, the Talmud as representing the oral Torah. Remember, in Jewish thought, in classical Jewish thought, the Torah was revealed in two it's twofold. There's the written Torah, which is what's written in the scroll, and then there's the oral Torah. Those are the traditions of how to understand the written Torah, which God gave to Moses orally. He didn't write them down, but transmitted them orally through the generations, and until the time of the rabbis, the Mishnah, and so forth, decided that they needed to commit it to writing so it wouldn't be lost. So in the rabbinic mindset, it's not possible to understand the written Torah properly without the oral Torah, right? In the minds of the Karaites, they say the oral Torah is just bogus. The written Torah is all there is. So yeah, it kind of depends, and it's a reasonable statement, but we have to recognize, and this I think it's important to me, I think, that we recognize the history of that accusation, because what it's led to. I mean, on the basis of the church saying that the Talmud is a falsification of the Torah and a perversion of it, Jews were persecuted immensely, horribly on that. The Talmuds were burned, and huge book burnings in France and elsewhere. I mean, the accusation that the Talmud in rabbinic Judaism is a falsification of truth might be a good intellectual exercise, but in reality, the way that is played out for our people has been very, very bad. So at the very least, as Jews, I feel we owe a certain allegiance to the rabbinic tradition, not only because it's the Judaism that we practice today, like it or not, but to go out and then espouse the idea that the Talmud and everything is just people made it up and it's not worth anything, puts us in the same camp as those who murdered and tortured Jews over the course of time. Okay? All right, so let's move on. Let's look at the next text. Let's see, Erwin, you want to read it? Messenger.
Messenger, do not be grieved by those who race to surpass one another in disbelief. The Jews who listen eagerly to lies, and to those who have not even met you, who distort the meaning of revealed words. If God intends some people to be so misguided, you will be powerless against God on their behalf. These are the ones whose hearts God does not intend to cleanse. A disgrace for them in this world, and then a heavy punishment in the hereafter.
Okay, so we see again that the charge of distorting the meaning of Revelation. But then let's talk about the significance of that last part, which is underlined. A disgrace for them in this world, and then a heavy punishment in the hereafter. What's the import to that? Okay, well, so Jews don't go to heaven, or yeah, that's true. That's bad. They're condemned to whatever. Yeah.
But because they're disgraced in this world, we don't have to treat them well.
Okay, yeah. It's God's will for the Jews to be disgraced, in the world. This idea is also present in Christian anti-Semitism. Remember, because God has rejected them for their rejection of Christ and the killing of Christ, they are condemned to live in a state of humiliation,
marginalization. That fuels church policy toward the Jews and the establishment of ghettos and all of those kinds of things in Christian Europe. Here, the Jews have to live in a state of disgrace. The experience of Jews under Islam in the Middle Ages, when Islam, was dominant in places in Europe and in Africa and so forth, was different than the experience of Jews under Christendom. I think it's pretty well kind of accepted by by historians that the experience of the Jews under Islam was significantly better than the experience of the Jews under Christians. Okay, and it was in the Islamic world where the Jewish philosophy flourished during this time. Maimonides lived in Egypt. He was in the Islamic world. A lot of intellectual and artistic creativity in the poetry, and science. All of this in the Jewish world was happening under Islam because Jews were regarded as second class to the Muslims. But as long as they kind of understood their place in the cosmic order, they were treated well. And Maimonides served as the physician to the Sultan. And Shmuel Hanagid, who's a very important Jewish poet of Muslim Spain, was a top advisor to the rulers. I mean, Jews occupied high positions in the Islamic world. And that's contrasted to the Jewish experience in Christendom, where they were shunned and left in ghettos and persecuted. Okay, so the experience wasn't one of disgrace like it was in Christendom. It was more of a second-class existence. Okay, Jews had to be subservient or subordinate to Muslims, but not persecuted. That's an important distinction. Nevertheless, we have to remember that this is, as the Quran envisions it, there is a divinely ordained cosmic order, and that is with the Muslims at the top, and Jews and other people of the book second to them, and then pagans and idolaters lower than them. Okay? So let's look at the last text.
When you read a religious foundational text like the Quran or the New Testament, it seems to me that particularly as it denigrates another people who have been in power and whose religion has been, has been in existence for a long time, and now you're trying to develop this new one. It's got to be read as a political document as well.
Sure.
For power purposes, wealth purposes. So it would be interesting to know when the Quran was written, what was going on with the Jews and this newly created group of Muslims,
yeah.
Politically, culturally. Because I think you got to look at those reasons.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know enough about it to be able to answer you. I mean, and I think that would require some in-depth exploration. But that's absolutely true. I think. I mean, this is definitely a political text, and it's responding to whatever is going on in the environment. But I think, for our purposes, at least in this class, the most significant kind of development that it's relating to is the Jews rejecting Muhammad's, prophecy. I mean, I'm sure certainly there are other things, but I think that's central to at least what we're looking at here. Okay, so in this last text, say, prophet, people of the book, addressing the Jews, do you resent us for any reason other than the fact that we believe in God and what has been sent down to us, while most of you are disobedient? Say, shall I tell you who deserves a worse punishment from God than the one you wish upon us? Those God distanced from himself, was angry with, and condemned as apes and pigs, and those who worship idols. They are worse in rank and have strayed further from the right path. Okay, again, it's the rejection of Muhammad. God is angry with the Jews. Two things that we learn additional from this passage. One is the idea that the Jews wish ill against Muslims. Okay, we kind of saw that already. It says that they had no regard for anybody but themselves. But there's a sense that the Jews actively wish ill against Muslims. And then secondly, well, the trope of apes and pigs. Okay, that surfaces again. All right, it's obviously just a way of denigrating Jews, but people today will use that motif. We're talking about apes and pigs, and it refers to Jews and grounds it in the Quran itself. And then they are worse in rank. Again, that points to the social structure which is ordained by the Quran. So when all is right with the world, according to the Islamic theological worldview, Muslims are supreme. People of the book are second to them. Okay, so that's going to pose a problem for Islamic fundamentalists, at least, in the modern world. In what way do you think does this pose a problem for them today that they have to deal with? When all is right with the world, Muslims are supreme, people of the book are second to them.
Well, today, everyone who's not Islam is an infidel.
Yeah, but what about the modern world presents a challenge to this theological worldview? Al?
Well, I think the living conditions in the Muslim world as compared with the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, that's an important piece of it. The Western world is more prosperous and stronger, militarily, in all kinds of ways. That's a huge problem to this worldview, and something that Islamic fundamentalism is very concerned with and condemns. I mean, there's reason for hatred against the West. Okay, and what else? Ben?
It seems to me, from that point of view, that the world would continue to be in disorder until everyone was a Muslim.
Well, not necessarily. Everybody doesn't need to be a Muslim, because it's just that the world has to be ordered in such a way that Muslims are supreme, and those who are not Muslims know their place and live within the construct of their sect.
That's clearly not the case in the world.
It's not the case in the world. That's right. And most prominently, in respect to the people of the book, we've got the state of Israel. Right? That's the biggest problem that modern Islamic fundamentalists have to deal with, because you have the state of Israel where Jews are the rulers. And it was what was once a Muslim land where Muslims were supreme. Now you have Jews as the rulers. The Jews defeat Islamic army, the armies of Islamic countries to establish the state of Israel and retain power. This is, in the eyes of the Islamic fundamentalists, which we're going to read about now, to read a text from one. This is the world as God wants it is on its head, right? It's not just that we don't like Jews and we want the land. It's more than that. The existence of life as it is today is a perversion of the divine order. That's the problem. Okay? Yeah, Rich.
Not just Jews, though, too. In the Central African Republic, the Muslims are busy slaughtering all the Christians. Killed them in Lebanon and Syria. So, we're particularly bad because we're annoying, but, there's a whole purity thing of...
Yeah.
It's not just us. It's not just us.
Right. Although, what we're going to look at is going to relate specifically to Jews. Okay, so let's look, turn to the next page. We're going to look at a text from... This is from a Muslim intellectual by the name of Sayyid Qutb. He wrote this in 1950, Our Struggle with the Jews. He was executed, he was Egyptian, he was executed by the Nasser government in 1966. Qutb was the kind of the intellectual patriarch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, and also is regarded as kind of the intellectual godfather of Al-Qaeda. Okay, although he pre-existed them. His brother was a professor in Saudi Arabia and kind of carried his ideas into Saudi Arabia. And his brother was a teacher of Osama bin Laden. And one of Qutb's students, his own student, was Ayman Zawahiri. We know his name from the news, who's kind of the Muslim Brotherhood guy and Al-Qaeda guy. So this is from his book, Our Struggle with the Jews, and it's very relevant to modern Islamic fundamentalism. So let's read from him. Let's see, who can read loud in a loud voice? Fred, can you read in a loud voice? Sure. Okay.
The Banu Israel were the first ones who confronted the Islamic preaching with enmity, treachery, and war in Medina and in the whole world of the Arabian Peninsula. Thus the Jews were the enemies of the Muslim community from the first day. The Jews were the same ones who instigated the polytheists, made promises to them, and conspired with them against the Muslim community. The Jews were those who undertook the war of rumors, hidden conspiracy and treachery within the Muslim ranks, just as they instigated dissemination of doubts, suspicions about Islam, and falsifications of the Muslim creed and leadership. All of that was before the Jews revealed their true face in their declared open war against Islam.
Okay, so just to pause here, we see he's making reference to what I said before about the tradition that the Jews betrayed Muhammad, right? He thought Muhammad believed them to be his friends, and then they turned against him and marshaled his enemies against him. And from that, we learned that we have this image of the Jew as treacherous and hostile toward Islam and seeking Islam's harm to Islam, right? So what he's suggesting here is, I mean, he despises Jews, obviously. Part of his despising of Jews arises from the sense that the Jews despise him, right? The Jews have been out for us since the first day. They betrayed the prophet, and tried to cause harm to him, and we see the world through this lens. This is what they're trying to do to us today. There's a siege, a besieged mentality here in respect to the Jews among these Islamic fundamentalist thinkers. Okay, keep going, Fred.
We also know that in spite of their possessing the true religion, there had occurred deviations from the truth in their belief, and that they had evinced a recurrent rejection of Allah's covenant with them.
Right, falsifiers of revelation. Keep going.
Thus did Allah put before the leaders of the Muslim community and the renewers of Islam's message living examples of the tribulations which befall peoples, as we have seen in the history of Jewish transgressions. From these gruesome lessons, the Muslim leaders will know how to treat the disease after knowing its nature. The Muslims will thereby avoid the worst possibilities of decadence inherent in their times of trouble. They will learn from the divine lessons of the absolute evil which enveloped the nature of the Jews, how to avoid such a fate. The Jews may try, but they will never destroy this people.
Okay, right, so here we have this description of the Jews as having kind of been corrupted by evil over time. They were originally the chosen of God and given the revelation of Sinai, but as time wore on, they became arrogant and susceptible to corruption. Remember, the Quran says the Jews listen eagerly to lies. Right? They kind of want, we're just nefarious by nature and have gone off the path, that God chose for us and have just twisted everything and perverted God's will. And he's saying the Muslims can learn from this because you know, the Jews have been poisoned and become demonic and enveloped by evil and decadence. You know, we have to avoid that fate. This accusation of decadence, by the way, is a very important one because it relates to it relates to Western culture. Okay, and for Qutb, he is an ardent opponent of Western culture, and that informs a lot of, at least what I understand, of his writings. He spent some time in the United States and came back and just became an ardent opponent of the United States and everything that Western culture stood for. And it's cast as decadent and licentious and, you know, just depraved. The Ayatollah Khomeini, who led the Iranian Revolution in the 70s, came up with a term for this, kind of warning the Islamic world against Western culture, and he called the influence of the West in the Islamic world West-toxification. Okay, so the in the Islamic fundamentalist worldview, it has to safeguard itself against the poisonous influences of the West, and the Jews are aligned with those forces, right? Okay, I'll keep reading. Therefore, the struggle between Islam and the Jews continues in force and will thus continue, because the Jews will be satisfied only with the destruction of this religion, right? They're out for us. Even after Islam had subjugated them, when Islam ruled supreme in the Holy Land and in Africa and so forth, they continued to fight against this religion through conspiracies, treacheries, and activating their agents in evil doing. This is the essence of the Islamic characterization of the Jew. Okay, treacherous, evil, conniving, and seeking harm to us. As for today, the struggle has indeed become more deeply entrenched, more intense and more explicit ever since the Jews came from every place and announced that they were establishing the state of Israel. Their greed now extends from afar to Jerusalem, and today they are merely steps away from it. Nothing will curb their greed short of Islam's defeating them. Right? So he's calling for just an all-out war against the Jews. It's a war of kind of self-preservation as he sees it. They seek to destroy us, so we have to destroy them first. Okay, let's turn now to the next text. All right, then this next text is Anwar Sadat. We all know him. Of course, the president of Egypt who made the Camp David Accords in 77. This is a text from an address, public address, in 1972. It's interesting to read it and then to see that he's the guy who made the Camp David Accords. But nevertheless, this is Sadat. Now, Sadat is different from Qutb in the sense that he is not an Islamic fundamentalist. In fact, Sadat is the successor to Nasser in Egypt, and Nasser's political ideology was Arab nationalism. And Arab nationalism is different from Islamic fundamentalism. It's not a religious ideology, it's a nationalist ideology. Nationalist ideologies, we see elsewhere in history too, including in modern times. Nationalist ideology, it emphasizes the those who are in and part of the national group versus those who are out. Right? Nazism was a nationalist ideology. The pure Aryan race, pitted in struggle against the foreign races and so forth. That's kind of a nationalist ideology. So Sadat and Nasser before him represented Arab nationalism. The Jews are cast as an enemy because they're not part of the Arab community. They're the other. Nationalist ideologies require an other. to be the enemy, to kind of foster this sense of national identity and struggle. But Sadat utilizes also religious imagery, of course, to help bolster the case. But when we read him, we just have to understand that he's not coming from an Islamic fundamentalist standpoint. All right, let's read it. We're going to hold questions just because I want to get through some of these texts. Okay, so Sadat. Nobody can ever decide the fate of Jerusalem. We shall retake it with the help of God, out of those whom the Quran said it was written of them that they shall be demeaned and wretched. Since when have these people had virtue? Only after the forces of imperialism put themselves behind them. But the forces of imperialism will not be able to challenge God's will. The forces of imperialism refers here to the United States and Britain, who support the Jews and the establishment of the state of Israel. This is relevant, although he's not an Islamic fundamentalist, as I mentioned. This is relevant to the theological view that we saw already in the Quran of the divinely ordained cosmic order. Remember, the Jews are, when everything is right with the world, the Jews are supposed to be second to Muslims, but it's not that way because the Jews are supreme in the state of Israel. That's a perversion of the divine order, and the only way it could happen is why? Well, what's enabling it to happen? The forces of the West, right? The Western imperialism, which is kind of evil incarnate in the world, the decadent, poisonous West, is behind the Jews. And it's because the Jews are allied with them that they have succeeded temporarily in overturning God's will. Okay? So you can see just in reading these texts why Islamic fundamentalism is so hostile to the West, because it's perceived as an existential threat to the way God desires the world to be. Okay? He goes on, they now talk of conducting direct negotiations. They were the neighbors of the prophet in Medina. They were his neighbors, and he negotiated with them and reached an agreement with them. But in the end, they proved that they were men of deceit and treachery, since they concluded a treaty with his enemies, so as to strike him in Medina and attack him from within. The most splendid things that the prophet Muhammad did was to drive them out of the whole Arabian Peninsula. We shall never conduct direct negotiations with them. Of course he did, 5 years later, right? We know our history and their history with the prophet in the past. They are a nation of liars and traitors, contrivers of plots, a people born for deeds of treachery. They shall return and be, as the Quran said of them, condemned to humiliation and misery. Okay? So you can see how the Quranic image of the Jew is utilized as a framework for explaining and understanding the world the way that it is. Right? It's supposed to be one way. God decrees that the world should be one way. The world we live in, though, is not that way. And it's because the Jews are liars and deceivers, and they have allied themselves with these poisonous forces and have succeeded at overturning the cosmic order. It's in the inherent nature of this is what the Jew tries to do. We've seen it from the time that they betrayed Muhammad all the way to the present day. They're trying to subvert everything. Right? Okay, let's move forward now. The next section I titled Holocaust Denial in the Modern Islamic World. There's tons and tons of material on this. It could be a whole class in itself. I just brought a few texts because I think it's an excellent example of kind of mainstream Islamic anti-Semitism today. We're going to look at our texts from the last, decade or so, not long. And this, Holocaust denial. Now, we know of this phenomenon from, some kind of fringe people in America and Europe who have, written books and stuff about it, and they're dismissed in the Western world as mainly as kooky. But in the Islamic world, they're not. In the Islamic world, Holocaust denial is very much mainstream. It pervades the media, the religious sermons, statements made by political leaders. Okay? We want to ask ourselves the question, why Holocaust denial? What end does this serve in the modern Islamic world? What do you think? Yeah.
Well, the Holocaust was the basis for the state of Israel.
Okay.
And if you deny the Holocaust, you deny the foundation of the state of Israel.
Okay, that's the most important thing here, right? That at least in the mindset of many in the Islamic world, if not most, the reason that there's a state of Israel is because of the West allied with the Jews in the wake of the Holocaust and made it happen. And it has legitimacy because of the suffering of the Jews in the Holocaust. If the Holocaust can be, proven as a falsity, then the state of Israel itself is delegitimized. So there is a political agenda behind it. So that we get. But what we have to ask is, how does Holocaust denial fit in with the Muslim world? I mean, Holocaust denial was initially a Western phenomenon. I mean, the quote-unquote authorities or leaders of Holocaust denialism are European and American. Yet, Holocaust denial has found very fertile ground in the Muslim world and has taken root there. Because of what we just said, it serves a political end. But an idea can only take root if there's, if there's already kind of something there to which it can fit in. I want to suggest that Holocaust denial fits in well with Islamic anti-Semitism going back to the time of the Quran. Okay? Because of the image of the Jew developed already since then, of treacherous and and deceiving and falsifiers of truth and so forth, Holocaust denial makes sense in the Islamic mind already. That's why it can work. Yeah, Michelle.
But is it the denial that it actually happened, or is it the justification of why it happened? Because it seems from what we've been reading, that the Islamists would say it was justified. These are terrible people. We needed to cleanse the earth.
They don't go that way. No. Holocaust denial is
that it just never happened.
Saying that the Holocaust is a hoax.
Right.
The Jews made it up. Okay, let's look at some of these texts and we'll get a better sense. Okay, so I've footnoted all of them so you can see the sources. Incidentally, I pointed here to there's a website, MEMRI, memory.org, I think it is. It stands for Middle East Media Research Institute. And it's very interesting. You can go there. That what MEMRI does is translates the Arabic and Iranian media. So they have radio broadcasts and TV broadcasts and sermons from mosques and statements by political leaders, all kinds of stuff translated into English so you can read what they're saying. It's very useful. All right, so let's look. This first one is number 7. Is a sermon, okay, from Saudi Arabia. Okay, so let's read. The Jews of yesterday are the evil forefathers of the even more evil Jews of today. Infidels, falsifiers of words, calf worshippers, prophet murderers, deniers of prophecies, the scum of the human race, accursed by Allah, who turned them into apes and pigs. These are the Jews, an ongoing continuum of deceit, obstinacy, licentiousness, evil, and corruption.
I wonder how he really feels.
Yeah, right? He's not mincing words. But you see here the image drawn from the Quran itself. okay, of all of these things, apes and pigs, prophet murders, etc., etc. And much like the Christian tradition does with the church fathers, the Jews of the Quran are understood, well, the Jews of today are understood as the same as the Jews of them. They make no distinction. There's Jewish characteristics and guilt and nefariousness. Everything is inherited. It is corporate. It's eternal. It goes throughout time. That's how Christianity held all the way until Vatican II, when the church said, the Jews, although the Jews of the time pressed for Jesus' execution, we don't blame the Jews of today for it. But prior to that, Jewish guilt in Christianity was regarded as corporate. All Jews were to blame for the killing of Jesus, and that's what's held here. We understand the Jews of today from what we read in the Quran. They're the same. And we know of them that they're treacherous and they seek to subvert everything and they wish ill for us, and Allah has cursed them, and they're trying to overturn the world as it ought to be. And that's, of course, so Holocaust denial makes total sense, right? Of course this is something that the Jews would do. They would make up something like the Holocaust because all they care about is perverting things to their benefit, right? Let's keep going. Among the Jews, this is an advisor to Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in Iran. Among the Jews, there have always been those who killed God's prophets and who opposed justice and righteousness. Throughout history, this religious group has inflicted the most damage on the human race, while some groups within it engaged in plotting against other nations and ethnic groups to cause cruelty, malice, and wickedness. Historically, there are many accusations against the Jews. For example, it was said that they were the source for such deadly diseases as the plague and typhus. This is because Jews are very filthy people. For a time, people also said that they poisoned water wells belonging to Christians and thus killed them. I brought this text because this reflects an importation of Western anti-Semitic tropes into the Muslim world. This stuff that he's saying here about the Jews poisoning the waters and the plague and Jews as dirty, that does not exist in the Quran. That arises out of Christianity and the blood libels and some of what we talked about last time. Even in the Roman world, they worshipped the donkey, a donkey's head. They didn't eat pigs because they were filthy like pigs and such. So what we have in the modern Islamic world is kind of a blending. We have the foundations of the Quranic images, Islamic tradition, merged with Western tropes that were brought into the Islamic world initially by Christian missionaries who came there, and then of course now in the global internet world, it's all there. And then we have all of that merged together. So you have the Jew as arrogant, corrupt, treacherous, conniving, and evil. That's what you get from the Quran, plus the images of filthy and blood libels and all of that, all merged together. Okay? Let's turn to the next one. This text comes from, this is really interesting. An Iranian Holocaust denial documentary series called The Merchants of the Myth. When the consciousness of the writer of history is mixed with philosophical, political, and racist motives, a distortion of history occurs. This is all the more true when this writing of history becomes a political tool aimed at achieving political interests and racial superiority. This is what happened in so many cases in history, including World War II. Okay, so the accusations that the Jews made up the Holocaust and so forth to serve this political end of establishing a state of Israel, which in the modern Islamic world Zionism is cast as racism. We know that from when the United Nations adopted that resolution condemning Zionism as racism back in the 70s, I think, and it has since been overturned. But this is from 2007,
in Iran. So I mean, it's still there. These texts depict the Palestinians and the broader Islamic world as victims of Jewish racism and corruption and so on and so forth, right? And the Holocaust is but a tool. They're falsifying history, right? See, this ties back to what already the Quran said about falsifying the revelation at Sinai. This is what Jews do. We take truth and twist it and pervert it and make it and just use it to serve our own ends. And they're condemning history as it's told today in kind of the mainstream Western world is just a Jewish falsification. They want to write history as they wish, and in light of their unparalleled power in the media, they have managed to impose the Holocaust issue and to depict themselves as oppressed. Even if we assume it happened, the Zionists, according to their protocols, that's referring to the protocols of the Elders of Zion, wanted to control the world, and they have not given up this idea. Okay? Reference to the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Again, that was a Russian Tsarist forgery, but the literature about anti-Semitism in the Muslim world says that the protocols of the Elders of Zion is cited frequently, commonly, and always as truth in the Muslim world. Okay? And then finally, this is a report from the news, Dr. Atia took out a large picture of the baby, Iman Hiju, who was recently killed in the territories from Israeli fire. On the picture, written in red, "The murderers of the prophets are the murderers of the innocent." She cried out, "This is the Holocaust, this is the Holocaust. There is no Jewish Holocaust, there is only a Palestinian Holocaust." Okay? So, see, everything is turned on its head. The Jews are out there claiming, they say, that they were victims of this Holocaust and all these people were murdered and everything. But you see, what Jews do is they twist history and they falsify the truth. And it's all of this is going to mask what is really the truth, which is the Jews are perpetrators, not victims, and they fooled everybody. That's the idea here. And it flows naturally, when you think about it, from the foundations that were laid much earlier. I'm sitting here looking at the camera, I'm thinking some of the stuff I'm saying, if somebody clicked on it, just randomly said, the Jews do that, I look like an anti-Semitic preacher. Okay. All right, so questions, yes. Okay.
If this is true, then how can you substantiate the reason for the centuries that Jews lived in Arab countries under peace and thrived?
Well, because they lived under Islam in the social order that was designed by God. As long as Jews are subservient to Muslim rulers, all is right with the world, and they're fine. That's why the Jewish experience was reasonably good.
And what caused it to change? Why were they thrown out of those countries?
Why were the Jews thrown out?
They were.
Well, the Jews were kicked out of Spain, chased out of Spain.
No, I'm talking about the 20th century.
Oh, in the 20th century.
They were thrown out of every Arab country.
I don't know. I mean, that may have more to do with Arab nationalism.
Yeah. That was 1948 when they started being thrown out.
Okay.
Okay. The reason they were thrown out is because the culture, the Western culture, invaded their.
Okay. Because the Jews are seen as allied with Western culture. That's what. And
every other anti-Semitism has always come from the same type of thing, the belief that the other is invading our culture.
Yeah, the Jews are seen as poisoning, the culture because of their alliance with the West. But it's not. But the issue there is the Jewish alliance with Western culture, not Jews as Jews.
My point is, from the time of Maimonides until 1948, they lived amongst them very long.
Yeah, because as long as Jews are as subservient to Muslims, it's okay.
in the Islamic worldview, but that's, see, there's separate issues, which is Jews as Jews within a Muslim context, and Jews as allies of Western culture. Western culture is a poison that is separate, but when the Jews are associated with it, then they're treated differently than they would be as just ordinary Jews under the Islamic rule. Yeah.
Related to that point, one of the things that has long influenced the Arabic view or the Islamic view of Western culture was the Crusades. And how did the Jews living in the Arabic world, what was their role during the period of the Crusades?
Jews were killed.
Yeah, I mean, Jews were
killed by the Arabs or by the Crusaders?
No, by the Crusaders, by the Christians. Yeah. I mean, in that sense,
along with the Arabs.
Yeah. I mean, the enemies there were those Christians on the one hand against everybody.
It was cultural. It wasn't religious. It was cultural.
So, I know we're talking about Islamic anti-Semitism, and the order, we should be second to the Islam. But there are billions of Christians. Why us? Where does this fit in?
Well, the Christians are also regarded as people of the book. So,
they are.
Yeah, so they're supposed to be subservient to Muslims too. I mean, that's, what Qutb advocated for is something that we hear about in the news today, which is the world, or the Islamic lands at least, ruled by Sharia, which is Islamic law. Okay, that was his political program, Qutb. He wanted a Muslim caliphate, I think is what they call it, an empire or whatever, ruled by Islamic law, a totally religious society. And in that framework, Muslims are supreme, people of the book are subservient to them. So it would be Christians just like Jews. The problem, the special problem with Jews, for Islamists today at least, is the state of Israel.
That's it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that regarding the expulsion of the Jews from modern-day Middle Eastern countries, it's the establishment of Israel.
Yeah.
That has
Israel adds a whole different dimension to it, and it's, there's opposition to Jews on the basis of Islamic theology, but also Arab nationalism, and their programs aren't necessarily the same. Ben.
I gather there are not similar references in the Quran to Christians and Christianity as there are to...
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I mean, it may be. I mean, I think there's. I think that. Well, I don't know. I don't know. We have to investigate.
Going back to the point I made earlier about looking at it as a political document, that when the Quran was written in the 8th century, that Christianity was certainly on the rocks. I mean, it was
sure.
In the ascendance, and Judaism was
in Europe, though. See, Islam is in the Arabian Peninsula, so there's Jews there, and I don't know what the political status of Jews was then, and I just don't know enough. But the Jews are more part of Muhammad's world than the Christians are.
What's it take with Muslims that Islam is practicing in the United States, and what are they teaching or what are they espousing?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that would be interesting to investigate. I don't know really much about it at all. But I guess we wonder. I mean, to the extent that these ideas, when the idea of a Muslim caliphate is, I mean, you already know right there, that means a certain thing for Jews, right? So I don't know. I guess we would have to worry if Muslims in the United States are teaching, reading.
Well, if they're reading the Quran, and the Quran is, this information.
Yeah, but it's a little more complicated than that, because yes, they're reading the Quran, but Christians are reading the New Testament, and we're reading the Torah, and all of them say some really nasty things about people of other religions, including our text. Now, we don't, our text doesn't know Christians or Muslims. It talks about, you know, idolaters and whatever else. But nevertheless, there are lots of nasty stuff about other people in all the sacred texts. So the way it's going to play out is really more dependent on how the teachers of the tradition interpret it and choose to emphasize it. So in Christianity, I mean, now, you know, we have the Gospels, which say, you know, which condemn the Jews for, you know, for killing Christ, his blood be on us and on our children. I don't know. Are they reading those passages liturgically in the churches? What are the pastors saying about it? Or, you know, are they saying, look, the Jews killed Jesus, you know? Or are they saying, you know, this is what the texts say, but we know that, you know, we don't hold Jews responsible. It all depends on the interpreters. That's why what we read in the Quran is one thing, but then when we see it carried forward into into the modern world, it's different. They're choosing to emphasize these really anti-Jewish passages in their sermons, as opposed to saying, and maybe selecting the positive things that the Quran says about Jews to emphasize.
But there are probably many teachers, particularly in the West, who are...
Right, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, this is Islamic culture in the Islamic world, not here. Okay, so let's wrap it up. Next week, same time, we have Lonnie Nassiter from the ADL speaking to us about anti-Semitism in Europe and the United States in today's world. So I hope you'll be here for that. All right, thanks everybody.
Get up.